I'm so honored, after having listened to all of the previous speakers, I'm so honored to be a part of this program and to have the opportunity to share just a few ideas with you. I come before you this evening as an elder with no hidden agenda, freed of the encumbrances of a need for more fame or money or power. And it's a privilege to open a meeting of a youth conference as an elder. You have everything at stake in what is or is not done in the next few years. Your entire future is at stake. And you don't have the investment in the status quo that adults have already made. You can make the change. You see, my generation and the boomers that followed forgot about you, and we partied as if there was no tomorrow. We enjoyed a period of unprecedented growth, economic growth, and change. Well, now the party's over, and it's time to sober up and clean up the mess. Else we leave that to you. As an elder, I call on all my fellow elders to get the hell off the couch, get off the golf course, because now is the most important time in your life. Elders have something no other group in society has. We've lived an entire life. We've made mistakes. We've celebrated a few successes. We've had failures. We've learned a lot. And now's the time to sift through that life of experience, to find the nuggets of knowledge, of experience that are worth passing on to future generations. Because we stand at an unprecedented critical moment in all of human history. Human beings have suddenly become a force of nature. We are altering the physical, chemical, and biological properties of the planet on a geological scale. On the physical scale, we are moving and damming great rivers, creating huge lakes that are so heavy that they induce earthquakes. We are lifting the tops off entire mountains to get at the coal beneath. We are gouging enormous pits, open pits, into Mother Earth. We are draining wetlands. We are converting forests into roads and ranches and farms and cities. Chemically, we are altering the chemistry of the atmosphere. We are now past 400 parts per million, a higher level than we've seen in over 1 million years. And that carbon in the atmosphere at the interface with the oceans is dissolving as carbonic acid and acidifying the waters of the ocean. We are poisoning the air, water, and soil so that all of you, however well you've tried to live your life, every one of us is filled with dozens of toxic chemicals. And biologically, we are transforming ecosystems of the planet. We are poisoning the air, the water, the soil, and in the process, driving over 50,000 species to extinction every year. We introduce alien species and create havoc around the world, and we are monoculturing the planet with our idea of domesticated plants and animals. That's why scientists today refer to this as the Anthropocene epoch, the epoch in geological history when we have become a force of nature. But in the process of acquiring such enormous power, we are undermining the very life support systems of the earth, the air, the water, the soil that gives us our food, the photosynthetic activity of the earth that gives us our energy, and biodiversity. How on earth did we arrive at this incredible moment in time? I'm a geneticist. And by the way, I want to tell our MC that when you put your thumbs like this, that's genetic. You inherit that. You can't help yourself. It's in your genes. But geneticists can take DNA, the genetic material, and use that to trace the movement of human beings across the planet over time. And all of the trails lead back to Africa 150,000 years ago. I can't wait to give a lecture to the Ku Klux Klan and tell them, what the hell's your problem? We're all Africans. That's where they will go. If we were able to go in a time machine back 150,000 years and park above the Rift Valley in Africa and gaze down, we would see animals in abundance and variety beyond anything you would see in the Serengeti today. And you'd have to look very closely, carefully to see those clusters of 3, 4, or 5 of those funny-looking two-legged furless apes, and that was us. Now I am sure no other species looked at us and went, shh, don't bother that animal, they're going to take over the planet. I mean, what the hell did we have going for us? There weren't very many of us, we weren't very big, we weren't fast or strong, we didn't have special senses of hearing or vision. What did we have going for us that would enable us to take over the planet in only 150 millennia? Well, of course, our secret was invisible. It was a 2-kilogram organ buried deep in our skulls. The human brain was our secret. Our advantage over all other species. That brain conferred a massive memory. No other mammal on Earth has the memory capacity of a human brain. We remember things. We learned by trial and error because we were curious. And we were very, very inventive. And that brain dreamed of something that no other animal has ever thought of, called the future. The future doesn't exist. The only thing that exists is now and what we can remember from the past. But because the human brain invented the idea of the future, we're the only animal that realized we can affect the future by what we do now. If we think of our experience and what we've learned, we can now look ahead and see where the dangers are. Where are the opportunities? And we can deliberately choose today to avoid the dangers and exploit the opportunities. I believe foresight was our great advantage. And today, that foresight has brought us to occupy all of the continents of the earth and become the dominant animal on earth. And now we have all of the increased brain power of scientists and supercomputers that give us the ability to look ahead with even greater accuracy. Listen to what some of our great scientists are telling us. Let me read to you a remarkable document. It was published in November of 1992 called World Scientists Warning to Humanity. 1,700 scientists from 70 countries in the world, over half of all Nobel Prize winners. I'm not on this. This is top scientists in the world. What were they warning us about? Let me read you some of their words. This is 1992. Human beings in the natural world are on a collision course. Human activities inflict harsh and often irreversible damage on the environment and on critical resources. If not checked, many of our current practices put at serious risk the future we wish for human society and may so alter the living world that it will be unable to sustain life in the manner that we know. Fundamental changes are urgent if we are to avoid the collision our present course will bring about. And then they go on and tell us where the collision is occurring. The atmosphere, water resources, oceans, soil, forests, species extinction, and overpopulation. And then the words grow even more bleak. No more than 1 or a few decades remain before the chance to avert the threats we now confront will be lost, and the prospects for humanity immeasurably diminished. A great change in our stewardship of the earth and life on it is required if vast human misery is to be avoided and our global home on this planet is not to be irretrievably mutilated. And then they tell us the critical things that we must do if we are to avoid the collision. This is a frightening document. But if this is frightening, the response of the media around the world was terrifying. There was no response. So that was published in 1992. And what has happened since? In Canada, we don't want to listen to the scientists who are looking ahead. We are shutting down our research facilities. We are muzzling scientists. We are vetting their reports through the Prime Minister's office. We are turning our backs on the very strategy that got us to this point over 150,000 years. Why are we now turning our backs on this powerful way of weaving our way into the future? For 95% of human existence, we were nomadic hunter-gatherers. We had to carry everything we owned on our backs, following plants and animals through the seasons. And when you're a nomadic hunter-gatherer, you know you are utterly embedded in nature and utterly dependent on nature for your survival and well-being. We've understood that since the beginning of time. In the last 10,000 years, we've undergone the agricultural revolution. In 1900, when there were only 1.6 billion people in the world, there were 14 cities with more than 1 million people. London was the largest with 6.5 million. Tokyo was the 7th largest with 1.5 million. The vast majority of people in the world lived in rural village communities because we were farmers. And farmers know that weather and climate will determine how well we will do in the coming year. Farmers know the amount of snow in the winter is directly related to how much moisture we have in the soil in the summer. Farmers understand we need insects to pollinate flowering plants, that certain species of plants will take nitrogen from the air and fix it as fertilizer in the soil. Farmers know that we are a part of it, embedded in nature. But in the last 100 years, we've undergone this unbelievable shift. We've moved from farming communities into big cities. By the year 2000, there were now 6 billion human beings, but more than 400 cities with more than 1 million people. Tokyo was the largest in the world with 26 million people, almost the population of Canada. And in a city, our highest priority becomes our jobs. And we think, well, as long as we have parks where we can go and camp and play, who needs nature? The most important thing to me in the city is my job, because I need a job to earn the money to buy the things I want. And so the economy then comes to occupy this high position in our lives, in our society. So when the Prime Minister Harper says, we can't afford to do anything about reducing greenhouse gases, it'll destroy the economy, he elevates the economy above the very atmosphere that sustains us. And we've heard it again and again. We have to clear cut this forest. We have to drag heavy weights across the ocean floor. We have to divert this river. We have to dump our sewage from Victoria into the oceans. We have to pour toxic chemicals into the air, water, and soil in order to be economically competitive. The economy comes in our lives now above everything else. Let's put the eco back into economics where it belongs. The environmental movement began in 1962 when Rachel Carson published Silent Spring, all about the unexpected effects of pesticides. And in only 10 years, millions of people around the world were involved in that environmental movement. The United Nations established UNEP, the United Nations Environment Program, and held the first global conference on the environment in Stockholm. And environmentalists achieved an enormous amount in the 2 decades following Rachel Carson's book. We got departments of the environment in all levels of government. We got laws to protect air, water, soil, and endangered species. And millions of hectares of land around the world were set aside as parks. These were enormous successes of the movement. And some of the battles that I was involved in small or in big ways over the years, we fought year after decade against the Alaskans who wanted to drill for oil in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, which was the calving grounds of the porcupine caribou herd. And each time there was an attempt to get permission to drill for oil, in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. We beat that back. We stopped the proposal to drill for oil at Hecate Strait off British Columbia's coast. David Anderson fought against the proposal to bring supertankers from Alaska down the BC coast to be refined in Seattle. We stopped the dam at Site C on the Peace River. And we stopped a major dam near Altamira in Brazil. Those were huge victories. We celebrated them. And yet here we are, 30, 35 years later. We are fighting the same battles again. All of those battles are back on the agenda. The Peace River Dam at Site C is going. The dam we stopped in Altamira is Belo Monte, and it's already being built. There are proposals to drill in Hecate Strait. There are proposals to drill in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. What on earth has happened? I say the environmental movement failed fundamentally because we didn't shift the way we see our place on the planet. And that's why it fills me with joy to see First Nations so much a part of tonight's events and in the coming days, because I believe that the lesson that we have to gain, the lesson we failed to inculcate in the environmental movement, was a radically different way of looking at the earth. My position today was taught to me by First Nations people. You see, as an environmentalist in the 60s and 70s, I thought the problem was humans were taking too much stuff out of the earth and putting too much garbage and waste back into the earth. So I thought we had to regulate our interaction with it. But when I began to make films, for example, one of the first ones we did was the battle over Haida Gwaii, the logging in Haida Gwaii, and I was confused. I said, look, the Haida are fighting logging, and yet you need economic development. You're desperate for jobs. Many of the loggers are Haida. The non-Haida loggers come into your community and shop in your stores. Why are you against logging? And Gujau, one of the people leading the battle against logging, said, yeah, of course, when the trees are gone, we'll still be here. But then I guess we'll be like everybody else. And at the time he said it, I didn't really get what he was talking about, until I looked at the footage days later in Toronto, and I realized what he was saying is we don't end at our fingertips or our skin. To be a Haida means to be connected to the land. That the air, the water, the fish, the birds, all of that is what makes the Haida who they are. And when you think about Canada today, this multicultural country, all but the First Nations have come from somewhere else. My grandparents came from Japan in the early 1900s. My mother and father were born and raised in Canada, but they didn't have grandparents, because the grandparents were back in the old country. And the grandparents were the roots that tied them to their culture. And that's the crisis we face, is that we newcomers who have taken over this land are rootless. Our roots have been cut off by the process of emigrating. And we didn't have respect for the people who were here to tell us about that relationship with the land. And so today, as I watch the coastal First Nations, and my wife and I have gone into every one of the coastal First Nations over the years, and the first thing they tell us is we need jobs. We need community economic development. And you can bet that Enbridge and the federal government have offered those nations millions of dollars. And yet they are 100% opposed to the pipeline. And the lesson is there are things more valuable than money. And we're not getting that. To Harper, to Enbridge, they think, oh, it's just a matter of giving them more money, give them more. That's not what the issue is about. And that's the challenge, is to shift that paradigm, to shift the way that we see the world and our place on it. And that's what I hope will come out of this for all of you. I am asked so many times by young people, what can I do to be an environmentalist like you? I want to save the earth. And I say to them, don't worry about the earth. The earth was here long before we were, and it'll be here after we go. But if you want to care for the biosphere, follow your heart. You see, environmentalism isn't a discipline or a specialty. It's a way of seeing our place in the world. And we need musicians and artists and doctors and teachers and plumbers and carpenters, all of them, to see the world that way and behave in a way that is with greater respect to Mother Earth. Is it? One of the ways you're too young to remember, but there were major battles over the forests of British Columbia for years. And the way the BC government dealt with this was to establish roundtables. And at the roundtables, all of the stakeholders come together. I hate that word, stakeholder, because it implies that there are vested interests of different kinds. And so the stakeholders, First Nations and the loggers and the enviros and the outfitters and ecotourists, all of the stakeholders would come, and then we would battle it out. And the result of the roundtables was you either compromised or there were winners and losers. And we're at a state we can't compromise anymore, and there can't be winners or losers. So I've been asked by the Vice President of Shell to come together with other environmentalists and with the executives of the oil company, and I did that. I went in. I was asked by Marcel Coutu, the CEO of a consortium of tar sands companies, if I would come and meet with them, and I said, sure, I'll come and meet with you. But I said to them, I don't want to fight anymore. Can we not begin with what we agree? And then we can build up how we're going to live. Once we understand what our fundamental agreements are on our basic needs. So how about this? We are animals. And as animals, if you don't have air for more than 3 or 4 minutes, you're dead. If you have to breathe polluted air all your life, you're sick. So how about putting clean air as our highest priority? Is there anyone, Mr. Vice President of Shell or Mr. Coutu, anyone that would disagree with that? That this is our highest need, clean air, and then clean water and clean soil that gives us our food, and photosynthesis and biodiversity. If we don't have those things, we don't live. So let's say those are our fundamental needs, and then what are our needs as social creatures, and then as spiritual animals, and then let's build the question of how do we live? And how do we create an economy? That's what we have to do. It's too late to start fighting. Let's now work together for those common causes. But in order to do that, we have to shift the priority or the paradigm. And that's what we get by the leadership of the First Nations. They've got what we desperately need. Thank you very much.